Find the margin of error for a survey with a given sample size. Recall, formula for finding the margin of error is 1 divided by the square root of the sample size. So on number 1, we take 1 divided by the square root of 958. Make sure that you're doing this. The number in the top is definitely smaller, so you know your answer is going to be smaller than 1. In this case, you should get 0.032. That's what your calculator should spit out. Now to change to a percent, we multiply by 100, and we have 3.2%. In number 2, I take 1 divided by the square root of 4,500. My calculator spits out 0.015. Again, I multiply by 100 and 1.5%. Number 3, still finding sample or margin of error. So 1 divided by the square root of 1250. I get 0.028 multiplied by 100, 2.8%. 1 over the square root of 55 is 0.135 multiplied by 100, 13.5%. Margin of error, what does this mean? The margin of error is kind of your window of opportunity to be wrong, right? We have a value here in the middle, and the margin of error says we can be this direction or this direction a little bit. So you might say, I want $20, but I'll take 18 to 22, and our margin of error would be 2 in either direction. So I kind of call it like wiggle room. It allows you to be wrong within reason. Will the margin of error increase or decrease with the sample size, and why? Well, let's look at some of our examples. From 1 to 2, our sample size increased hugely, and our margin of error went down. Because if you think about it, the sample size is like how many people you're talking to. The more people you talk to, the more accurate your data is going to be. If you only talk to 10 people, you're not getting a very good data, a very good sample. So as the sample size gets bigger, the margin of error decreases because your information is more accurate, and the more accurate you are, the less wiggle room you need. Okay, let's do some problems. An online poll of 1,324 students found that 84% of them think cell phones should be allowed in class. What is the population? Now, first of all, the population, you want to think about all. Population is every person that you potentially could have talked to. So we are talking about high school students. So the population, we could have talked to all high school students, right? That's the population. I always think about the word all should be in there. When you get to the sample is the people you actually did talk to. Well, I talked to 1,324 high school students. So I always think about population has the word all, sample actually has a number. There's the difference between a population and a sample. What's the margin of error? Well, remember, margin of error is 1 over the square root of the sample size, which in this case is 1324. So I have 0.27, which is 2.7%. So what is my 95% confidence interval? Well, recall that 84% said that they thought it was. So to find my confidence interval, I'm going to subtract my margin of error, and I'm going to add my margin of error. So my confidence interval is going to be from 81.3% to 86.7%. And now we can write that answer in a meaningful sentence. Now the key to the meaningful sentence is having all of your pieces. So you got to start with, how confident are you? We are 95% confident that between 81.3 and 86.7%, I should have my percent, of high school students think cell phones should be in class. Cell phones should be in class. Now, I call these like Mad Libs, if you remember Mad Libs from your childhood. You got to start with your confidence, 95% confident. You need your interval. You need your population, and you need what they're doing. Those are the 4 pieces that you have to have in your meaningful sentence every time. Let's do another example. A poll of 540 college students found that 93% said colleges should do away with final exams. Yeah, I bet they did. Okay, population. Remember, population has the word all. Who are we talking about? In this case, we're talking about college students. The sample is going to have the number. Well, 540 college students. Margin of error. Well, 1 divided by the square root of what's my sample size? In this case, 540. So I have 0.043, which makes it 4.3%. To find my 95% confidence interval, I take the point estimate they gave me, which was 93%, and I'm going to subtract 4.3, and then I'm going to add 4.3. So my confidence interval is, lost it on my paper, 88.7% to 97.3%. That's a 4, 97.3%. There's my interval. So when I write my sentence, we are 95% confident that between 88.7% and 97.3% of college students think colleges should ditch final exams, right? You got to play your Mad Libs. Confidence level, confidence interval, population, what are they doing? Those are your 4 pieces. Do you agree or disagree? I bet most of you probably agree. I disagree. Should colleges make decisions based off this poll? I'm going to go with no. Of course students think that you should get away with final exams. Who wants to take a final exam? Not me, right? Nobody does. So no, colleges should base their decisions on, actual data, not, student surveys. All right, let's do another example. Ivy Tech students were asked, what kind of music do you like to listen to in your car? Of these, 27% country, 40% rap, 10% Christian, 20% rock, and everybody else is like, whatever. So 2,000 students were polled. What's the population? Well, who did we talk to? Ivy Tech students. So all Ivy Tech students were the population. What's the sample? Well, we only talked to 2,000 Ivy Tech students, right? The sample has the number, the population has all. Margin of error, well, we find that by taking 1 divided by the sample size, and the sample size is 2,000. So 0.022, which is 2.2%. 95% confidence interval. Well, and this is for country music. So if I go back, 27% said country. So I'm going to do 27%, and I'm going to subtract 2.2, and I'm going to take 27%, and I'm going to add 2.2. So I end up at what is that? I don't know. 24.8% to 29.2% is my confidence interval. So when I go to write my statement, we are 95% confident that between 24.8% and 29.2% of Ivy Tech students prefer country music. Pardon my horrible handwriting, right? Mad Libs, 95% confident, there's my interval, this is my population, what are they doing? 4 pieces. What's the confidence interval for rap music? Well, if we go back, you see that rap, 40%. So I take my 40% and I subtract 2.2%, and I take 4 and I add 2.2. So that 95% confidence interval would be 37.8% to 42.2%. So when I write my statement, we are 95% confident that between 37.8% and 42.2% of Ivy Tech students listen to rap music. And again with the Mad Libs, 95% confident. Here's my interval. Population, what are they doing? That's what we want. And the last one for this video. In a poll, 3,500 Americans were asked if they were going to vote Republican or Democrat, or if they're undecided. Of these, 37% said Republican, 41% said Democrat, 22% were undecided. Find the margin of error. Okay, let's just stop there. Margin of error. 1 divided by the square root of 3,500 gives me a margin of error of 0.017, 1.7%. There's my margin of error. Determine 95% confidence interval for those who are undecided. Well, 22% is undecided. So 22 minus 1.7, 22 plus 1.7, and my confidence interval is going to be 20.3% to 23.7%. Now, the purpose of this is that if we would go out and we would survey a bunch of people, we would expect something in this range to be undecided. Okay? And if we write a sentence, we are 95% confident that between 20.3% and 23.7% of Americans, because that's my population, are undecided in the presidential election. All right, again, Mad Libs. Confident, 95% confident. Here's my interval. Population, what are we talking about? 4 pieces to every one of these meaningful sentences. And